Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Tammy Alvarez. How are you today, Tammy?
I'm great, Desiree. Thank you so much for inviting me today.
Wonderful. Well, I am excited to have this conversation with you and for the listeners to hear the knowledge and the experience that you have. I'm just thrilled. Tammy, you are the founder, you're a CEO, you're an author, a coach, a keynote speaker, all of the things, and you were just killing it. It's an honor to have you on. You founded the Career Winners Circle. And so we're going to dive into this and talk about what that is and what you do and who you are helping. But first, I always ask my guests, how did you get here? Where did you start? What kind of led you down this path? And share that with us if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always good questions like, how did you get here? Sometimes I wonder that myself, right? I'm like, how did I get here? But bringing it to the end first, and I'll back up a little bit. Before I started the Career Winner Circle about 6 years ago, I had made my career as an executive on Wall Street. So I was a C-level executive. At the height of my career, I was managing 2,000 people in 35 countries. I was known as a transformation expert. So when everything was just completely imploding, my team was running into the proverbial building to put out the fire. And fortunately, in financial services, there's always something going wrong. So we were always excited. And I got there in a very untraditional way. When I was growing up, my parents had split up when I was about 15. My mom had gotten pregnant with me in high school, so she never finished high school. She took care of my sister and I and helped my dad with his business. And then after they split up, very shortly after that, my mother and my sister and I became homeless. And that really had such an impact on how I viewed the world and how I moved through my career. Because by the time I graduated high school, I had no money and no ambition. So I went straight to work. And so I didn't get my college degree until I was 40. Yet I was a managing director at 35, typically the only woman at the leadership table, usually the youngest. And I had to find a different way because my ambition was fueled by fear. I didn't want to let history repeat itself. I didn't want to, and so I was running from that hard. And so I learned early in my career to take risks, to learn how to fail successfully, and really step into the mindset and taking the actions through a lot of trial and error and mistakes of if I didn't like something, then I changed it. And because I had that mindset, I would always lean into three things to be passionate about. I was either passionate about my people, I was passionate about the work, or I was passionate about the opportunity for me to personally grow. And when all three of those things were no longer existent, it was time to make a move. So I was in 5 different industries around Wall Street. I was leading teams from sales to audit and everything in between. And so my background is really very diverse. And I remember sitting in a boardroom on the day that my corporate career got a death sentence. And it was the end of the quarter, and we missed earnings again. And the analysts just cleaned our clocks again. And we were just waiting for our executive to come in and just read us the riot act. And typically, when this happened, it happened every quarter, it turned into like a game of volleyball, like whose team was the most responsible for all the bad things that happened. And we would just blame everybody else. And I remember this time, like I was kind of floating over the boardroom table and I just got this massive case of, I don't give a shit like this. And I didn't care anymore. And I knew that that was the beginning of the end. And so very shortly after that, I ended up cashing out of my big girl job, moving to a tropical island off the coast of Belize in Central America, and starting this coaching business. So that is my story in a nutshell.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Tammy, amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what a journey, to be sure. Talk about a huge change from where you started to where you are now. and the experiences that you had in between is just phenomenal. So thank you for sharing that briefly with us. I think it's such an interesting, you shared about how you were so determined, like the fear of what was going to be the driving force for you going forward. And so that's such an interesting way to think about it, because many people could say, this is how it was, this is how it's going to be, always going to be that way, and then just be stuck there. And sounds like that was not the case.
Yeah, it was never that way for me. And even at a young age, like 5, I remember always wanting to sit up at sit at the grown-ups table and not play with my cousins. And the rules always applied to everyone else, not me. Like I never really understood the word no, at least how it applied to me. And that's how I became a rule breaker kind of in corporate as well. I do have this break all the rules approach that we like to say. And because we do have a choice. And then again, all of this is with the benefit of hindsight. I was running terrified. I had the imposter syndrome before it was a thing, right? I've been fired twice and layered and a million different things that have gone on because I think we all know, but we don't believe that success is not linear, right? And we look at it, it's like a roller coaster ride, right? You're at the peak and then you come back down again, and those hairpin turns that we all kind of get stuck around. And I was able to stay resilient because I played like I had nothing to lose. Because as a small town country girl from northern New Jersey, I really didn't. If I was anything more than a waitress or a data entry operator, I was in good shape. I was like, yes, this is great. And but I had the benefit of some amazing mentors throughout my career. And these are people who saw more in me than I did. And they would just put me in situations that I would just have to figure out, but then give me the support and the fail-safe environment to make the mistakes, but to really ultimately find a path forward. And that's, I think, the resilience that we all need. And we get it through different means, but when you don't have it, it just makes things a lot more difficult, right?
For sure. And as you said, just having those mentors that guided you and gave you some bumpers, if you will, to keep you in this is the kind of the safe way to go here. That's tremendous. And when you don't have that kind of guidance and the support, you can absolutely go off the rails. And so that is a big deal. And so then is this kind of what inspired you to start then, Career Winner Circle? And you said that you knew the writing was on the wall with this job. It was the end. And you were like, I just don't care anymore. And so, kind of tell us what inspired you? What created this environment for you to make this?
It was a perfect storm for me, right? So I think like everything in life, it's an opportunity and the timing in terms of how that worked out. And so I knew that I was done. I knew that getting another COO job at another bank would just be the same lipstick. Right. And I was like, I can't suffer this for another minute. And what started this early for me is I always knew that I wanted to be a coach during what I called my soft retirement. Because you age out of Wall Street. You just do. And you still want to be relevant and you still want to have a sense of purpose. So it's like, all right, in my soft retirement, I'm going to, coach and sit on a couple boards and, maybe do some teaching at a university level. And that was the extent of my plan because it wasn't supposed to happen until 10 years later. And so when I pulled the plug early, then I'm like, oh, like I don't want just a commercially viable side hustle to make me feel relevant. Like I have energy. And so now I'm building an empire instead. So a little bit of a change of track. But what really hit me was the fact that my daughter was graduating college. So she was off the payroll. My big fancy apartment in Manhattan, the lease was coming due. So it was like a good time to pull the plug on my very expensive and fancy lifestyle. And then my partner, who we were dating at the time for several years, finally got our act together and said, we kind of like each other a lot. So let's do something. And we just decided that it was a great time to make a big reset because I still loved the work. I love transformation and drama and helping people navigate through the gray and the uncertainty and change. And that fires me up. And so I knew that, I needed a massive reset. So I jokingly, because we lived on a little tropical island. And so I jokingly say I went from Soho to Boho. And, I got rid of all my designer stuff. I got rid of all the things that I knew I didn't even go with the Gucci flip-flops. Like I had nothing when I moved. And it was just such a nice reset. 'Cause I moved into an environment where the expat community didn't care what you did for a living. And I had to find other things to be interesting about. Not interested in, but to be interesting because I was so unifocused on my career. And it defined who I was as a person to the extent where when you take that away, it's like, oh, hang on a second. What else is there other than golf and some travel and family? And so it caused me to really do the reset that I needed to get that balance in my life. I would go scuba diving 3 days a week before work. And we'd be in the office around 10 o'clock in the morning, all salty and stuff, but still getting things done. But I felt guilty because I'm like, I should be working. I'm like, who cares? No one even knows. And so that journey was a really interesting way to find a way that gave me balance and that brought back the fulfillment of, things outside work. Because I was in that transition situation, which a lot of women are in. And my daughter was off and starting to adult, right? And all of these other things were changing. So I really had the opportunity to be like, what serves me? What gets me excited and nervous and all the things at the same time? And I was able to kind of get back into that play big mode and take a few risks at the same time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tammy, for sharing that with us. The idea of finding what lights you up, right? What makes you excited. And that is fantastic. And so many people are just on that career coaster and just nothing else in their life. It's just all work that defines who we are and what we do. And so that's just a tremendous story. Thank you for sharing that with us. I love it. So tell us then, what exactly does the Career Winner Circle do and help for the people who are involved in it?
Sure. We've had an evolution like everything else, right? Everything kind of grows and evolves. And as I was starting as an entrepreneur, I had no idea what I was doing. I made every mistake you could possibly imagine. Only they were on my dime this time, right? So I made the stakes a little bit higher. I'm like, oh, that's actually my money I'm losing now. So I need to figure this out quickly. And I started by making the classic mistake of building an ideal program and product that no one wanted to buy. So I was like, everyone needs this. And that's true, but no one would buy it. And I was like, oh, I should pay attention to that. Because I was such a strong transformational leader throughout my career and so passionate about it. And most people are not good at this at all. I'm like, okay, this is great. I'll do that. I'll show people how to lead through transformation, through change, through all that stuff. Sound like a solid plan. However, I was not going to sell to businesses. I told myself that I wanted to sell to consumers because I was still addicted to the work. And if I started selling into businesses and financial services, I was going to end up doing the same stuff that I was getting away from. And so I'm like, I'm going to detox from that. I'm going to try something new. But it turns out no one will pay to be a transformational leader because that doesn't actually hurt. They can still keep their job. So companies would pay for that. I wasn't selling to companies. And so, 6 years later, you look back and you're like, oh, well, of course. But when you're in it, you're learning. And so the track that found me was helping mid to senior level leaders pivot out of the soul crushing grind and move into something, to your point, that energizes them without having to sell everything and live in a yurt. Everyone I talk to, whether they're a CEO, senior leader, mid-level, it doesn't matter. They have this mindset that I know I don't like what I do, but I don't know what I want. So there's one thing to unpack. And at this age, you feel like you should have it figured out. But newsflash, if you don't, you are in very good company. And so you got that to unwind. And then we're all of a sudden willing to give away everything we've worked so hard for in terms of our own capabilities, our ability to make an impact, and our ability to deliver for an organization, that we are willing to trade away those bargaining chips, if you will, just to be happy. And I'm like, why do you have to give up everything you've worked so hard for? It's not a zero-sum game. You can have both. You should have both. And that's why, our tagline is everyone deserves to love Mondays. And you know that you are in the career trap if you get that pain in your stomach on Sunday nights, thinking, I cannot suffer fools another minute. And whether you're in corporate or whether I work with business owners who hate their companies because they've let them run them. They're a victim of their own success. So we all find ourselves in these situations where what we're doing doesn't serve us. And the more toys we have, the more money we make, the more responsibilities we have, then we feel the harder it is to make that shift, both from an economic perspective, from an impact standpoint. We don't want to start over. And so that found me, is that showing people how to do the things that I had done, how to reinvent yourself in a way that you're continually thriving and moving forward. So that's where we started. But now, fast forward 6 years later, we've got 5 coaches on the team. We are servicing the same core group that we've always serviced. But now we're focused on leadership development. We do coaching for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And then we also do in the middle market sector to really help them optimize their talent to increase revenue and productivity, because the relationship between employer and employees has never been more fractured. And it's only getting worse. And at the rate of change that we are seeing, which is not forecasted to end, it's continued, like those dysfunctions are exacerbated. And so we help those middle market companies figure out, okay, how do I get this right? How do we start to unwind some of the things that we've done to create this fractured relationship and start to do this in a different and a unique approach? So now we've got a whole service offering in terms of being able to bring our knowledge and our capabilities to the market. But at the end of the day, it boils down to 2 things, right? It's about loving Monday and just being able to tap into an individual's ambition, wherever that is, whatever that is, to be able to thrive and to make that impact again.
Oh, yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Tammy, so much for that. What popped into my head when you were talking about Mondays is what we're hearing so much people saying, like Sunday scaries, and how everybody's just like dreading going back to work on Monday. And of course, there's a segment of the population who's like, I want to have a job that, I can go to on Monday. But then there's a segment who's like, I just don't want to go back to that soul sucking job, or this business that I have built that now I feel trapped by because of all of these other circumstances. So talk with us about that, and let's dive into your book, because you for sure go into how to love Monday and not have those Sunday scaries anymore.
Yeah. And I think there's 3 big steps. If you are sitting here as a leader, business owner, anything in between, and you start to get that pit in your stomach on Sundays, there's 3 steps that you can take today to start to change that course. And I think the first thing to think about is to reevaluate what you're chasing and why. Right? We're always after the next thing. And most of the time we're not checking back in to figure out, why are we doing this? Right? And we need to realize, embrace, and be happy about the fact that we have seasonalities within our lives and within our careers. And so checking in to see where those goalposts are and have they moved is critical, because a lot of times you're killing yourself only to find out you're running the wrong race. It's like, I get to the finish line and then you end up with like, is this all there is? And that's a good indication that you ran the wrong race. I mean, for me, when I was younger in my career, it was to not have history repeat itself. Right. Then as I started to see that success and that, the chances of that happening became very slim, then it was like, okay, world dominations. How can I continue to grow and lead bigger teams and make a bigger impact and all those things? Because I was the underdog. So I was like, all right, let's see how far we can take this. But now as a business owner, and changing my focus to where my success comes through other people's success, not my own necessarily, then those goalposts are different. Right. It's more about the impact and just getting those emails and those text messages. And, I got this, which is different because of what we did together, and seeing my coaches have the same result with their clients. And so step 1 is check those goalposts. Why are you going after what you're going after? If it's because you feel compelled to do that, and this is really where you believe that career will serve you, excellent. If it's because it's what you're supposed to do, if it's because what is the only option you have, if it's because you want to buy the Range Rover so you can get one just like your neighbor, then those are the wrong reasons, and go back and reassess, right? So step 1 is make sure you're running the right race. Step 2, to kind of get out of this, is to really focus on the things that light you up. What are the things that you could do for 12 hours a day and end the day more energized than when you started. For me, it's working with clients, my coaches, and doing this, right? Podcasts and keynotes and all that kind of fun stuff that feeds my energy. I end the day and I'm like, all right, I can run a marathon here. I feel great. Now, for running a business, I can do the strategy and the finances and the social media and all the other things. But after about an hour or so, I'm spinning in my chair throwing puzzles at the ceiling. So I'm like, I'm bored. And inside, it's like a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum. And so when you can figure out the things that light you up, those are most likely going to be your strengths. They're the things that you love, that you're passionate, and most likely things that come naturally. And so what would happen if you could play to your strengths more often? We get to do a little bit of it every day usually, but not the lion's share. And so if you could create an environment, you don't necessarily even have to make a career move, right? You can stay in role and be able to do this. But if you can really identify the things that really energize you and do more of that every single day, that's going to start to reset that clock. And that's going to start to help you figure out, okay, now I'm playing to my strengths. I'm doing things that I love and that I'm good at and that people care about because it's making that impact. So that's number 2, right? Run the right race, make sure that you're playing to your strengths. And then I think the third step is to really assess the level of risk and that seasonality in your career and make sure that you are failing successfully to accelerate, right? We all have different seasonalities. So when I was early, I had a lot of risk. When I had my daughter and my husband was a stay-at-home dad, I pulled back a little bit, right? I was the breadwinner, so I couldn't be so brazen to do that. I already got fired once. I didn't want that to happen again, right? And then now I can play big again. So there's a whole seasonality. So when you know that level of risk, get comfortable with failing. And so many of us avoid failure at all costs. We don't want to lose face. We don't want to look stupid or have people say weird things about us or whatever, right? We always are afraid of that. But here's the reality. You cannot succeed without failing. It's impossible. And so if you are avoiding failure, you are actually preventing success. And so the way you can get comfortable with this is, trust me, I've got my own set of issues. A lot of things are very hard for me as well, is I've created, and we hear a lot of people talk about this, but when you have an experimental mindset, then you get much better at failing successfully because we back ourselves into this corner that it's either a success or failure, right, wrong, black, white, yes, no. When the reality is nothing is a complete success. And nothing is a complete failure. It's a narrative. And so if we transparently communicate about this mindset in terms of we're going to experiment and we're going to do this for a little bit, and then we're going to keep the things that work, we're going to get rid of the things that did not, and then try again, then all of a sudden you're not worried about having egg on your face and how this is going to look politically because it's expected. And so if you can adopt that for yourself, and the thing that confuses me is that from a software development perspective, everyone uses agile development now. No one builds it one time big and delivers it. They understand the value of iteration and doing a little bit at a time and looking at it. And is that what you want? Is that really what we're doing? And so we've adopted this mindset already for how we build software. So why can't we just give ourselves the same grace? And so those are I think the 3 things that will really help get rid of those Sunday scaries, get that pit out of your stomach, and be able to really focus on the things. If you're not ready to make a big change, then those are the easy things to, not easy, but the things you can do to really kind of help reset that for you and get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah, great suggestions, Tammy. Thank you so much for sharing those. This idea of iteration and test and see the reaction, right? It's like an experimentation, and you can do this in smaller ways and see if I try this, what happens. And, there's an expression around that. It's like, well, go ahead and test that theory and see what happens, right? And so you can do that in a way like you just shared, where you're just like, okay, all right, that didn't work, or this worked of that, and let's try this now that we know this has happened. Great stuff. And I think if we remember that, we can keep trying.
Absolutely. And we have that, what does this button do mentality, right? But here's what happens. When we get into leadership roles or when we are trying to navigate our day, we pretend that we have all the answers. It's like, we're going to take this hill, right? And even if you're right, so here's my take on this, right? Even if you are 100% right, which you're never going to be, but let's say today you made the perfect decision for something that you wanted to do 6 months from now. Now, we all know the volatility that we live in, right? We're in an election year. There's geopolitical instability everywhere. It's just chaos out there, right? So the best decision, the most perfect decision made today could be absolutely the wrong thing to do based on factors you had no control over tomorrow, a month from now. And so, but so many people are just put those blinders on, like, we're going this way, and that's it. And then you wonder why everybody's like disenfranchised and saying, you're out of 11 mind, this is never going to work. And just kind of smiling their way through doing nothing. And that's where that apathetic haze comes in. So I think as we think about the vulnerability it takes to be like, we're going to test. I don't have all the answers. And even if I did, everything is changing so fast, they may not stay the right answers and have that inclusivity. And it's a lot more fun and you're a lot more effective as well.
Good stuff. And it's something that just came to mind though, is what can happen, is some people is that sort of freeze instead of making a decision because of all the things that you just shared are happening around the world and in our country and so on. How do you get around that? At what point do you just say, okay, I've got to make some kind of decision?
Yeah. First of all, realize that any decision you make is never permanent. Right? We back ourselves into making these decisions thinking it's going to be forever and ever, and it's not. You're the boss of you. And we talk about becoming the CEO of you incorporated. So you're the CEO of you. You get to make those decisions and get those changes. And first of all, realize that there is no such thing as a permanent decision. You can always change in terms of how that goes. But I also think what I've always said is that during times of chaos, when everyone else is hiding under their desks, hoping not to get fired, that is the best time to search. Because in the absence of leadership, because everyone's hiding under their desks, people will follow. And it's amazing how that happens. Most of us will wait for permission before we assume a leadership role, either hierarchically or, just through how work gets done. But when you're seeing that everyone is hedging and no one is doing anything, and the business results are suffering and everyone is disenfranchised, that is the absolute perfect time to lean in and start to take that leadership role, whether you're given permission or not. Because we are going to do this in an inclusive way. We're going to get everybody involved that is around the table, whether in our teams or our business partners or our stakeholders. And when you're seen as that consensus builder who's willing to say, okay, I'll lead the way, but it's not just me, no one wins alone. So let's all do this together and make it our own. You would be surprised how many people are just dying for that kind of leadership. And so I think this is the time to surge. This is the time to make your big move because no one else is. And when you do it during these times, the beauty of it is no one expects you to be successful. So even if you get something 60% of the finish line, you're a hero. Versus trying to set something up that's, teed up for perfection, where if you're 80%, you've failed, right? So this is a very fluid time to control the narrative and to be able to step into the things that you love doing, that light you up, and that give you that energy and to really make a big difference.
What a great way to think about it. I love that. This chaotic time is the time for leaders to step in because they're missing. And so what a great way to think about it. If you see in your work environment that there's that gap and you're ready for it, jump in.
Even if you're not ready for it, because you won't be fully ready, right? So especially with women, right? It's like, no, don't wait till you're ready. Just do it and you'll get ready when you're there as you go. Right? So as long as my motto was this, like when you do these things, two things have to be present, right? One is your business function has to be involved in some way or else it makes no sense. So you want to do that. Two, the results you're driving for have got to be measurable because if you can count it, then it counts. And all of the people sitting on the sidelines throwing pot shots saying, I knew you were going to be successful. If you've got numbers that can prove the contrary, which you will, then those are the two things from a safety perspective to take those risks. And the one thing people miss, especially during moments of big change and uncertainty, is every day we have a choice. Are we going to lead with purpose and clarity and urgency, or are we going to lead with panic? Because you can take the same situation and you can lead with urgency or you can lead with panic. It's your choice. Urgency is that sense of optimism for the future. And yes, we don't know any of the answers, but we're going to continue because we know that with our hands on the steering wheel, we're going to drive in the right direction. Panic is a sense of scarcity and loss. And, that's when the bad actors really come out in terms of seeing their true colors and, in terms of fear of loss and things like that. But we have a choice on how we want to show up. And whether you're an individual contributor doing your thing, or whether you're a leader leading thousands of people, everyone every day has that choice.
Mhm. Yeah. And you know what came to mind when you were talking about panic is just this image of a fire, papers in the air, everybody's running around screaming, and that's absolutely not going to get you where you want to go. But with urgency, like you said, you've got your hands on the wheel, you're you're positive, going in a direction you think is going to work, and you're going to make it the effort and try and see what happens. And so I can totally see that in my mind, and I love it. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you now, how would you define success?
I think everyone has their own definition of success. For me, my success now, because again, with the seasonality, is really starting to move into the legacy that I'll leave behind and the impact that I'm able to make on other people. That's really for me where I get excited. And like twice in one day, I got this voicemail from one of my clients. I couldn't have done this without you. She started to cry. And I'm like, oh my God, don't make me cry. And, another one who's been trying forever to achieve a goal. And she finally got there. And to see the light bulb come on and to see, okay, I am living a life I never even would have given myself permission to consider, let alone take action on. Like that to me is success. I think everyone needs to check in because success is not the same all our lives. And so for me, it's about helping everyone, whether they're on the CWC team, whether they're a client or one of our business partners. It's just how do we make everyone succeed? How do we help everyone get to that magical place where you do love Mondays and you have that whole life fulfillment and you're doing the things that you love and making the impact that you know that you're here to make. And so for that is, I am just doubling down on that all day, every day, and, just wake up excited to do it.
Oh, yeah, excellent. And it goes back to the idea of the goalposts, right? And what are those goalposts to you? And if you're reaching those, is that success for you? Because you've established this is what I want to achieve or the goal I want to reach. And so, yeah, I could see how it would be different for everyone.
Yeah, and that wasn't even my goal 6 years ago. My goal was to survive as an entrepreneur. I don't know if I could do it, and literally it was go big or go home. If this didn't work, I was gonna have to go back to New York and get a big girl job again, and that just sounds terrible. So even 6 years ago, my goal was not that. It was, I need to learn this, I need to master this, I need to figure this out. And then once the business was stable and I'm like, okay, this is actually a thing now, we're good. Then we could start to focus on, okay, that's good, I mastered that. Now where am I finding my joy next? And it'll change. You and I have a conversation 2 years from now, I'm sure it will be different again.
Yeah. And talking about the entrepreneurial journey because it's challenging,
Most
right?
definitely.
What would you say like you learned through that process about yourself?
I think the biggest learning I had is that I had a tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm.
And I was so focused on the anti-corporate lifestyle, right? I got rid of all my stuff, moved to tropical islands, scuba dive 3 times a week, sandy toes all the time, and starting this company that I abandoned all of the skills and knowledge and the thought process that had gotten me to the point I had in my career. And so when the business wasn't actually working, I hired a coach. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting tired of losing my own money here. I'm going to have to figure this out. And so I hired a coach and she's like, well, where's your financials? Where's this? Where's that? I'm like, well, I don't do any of that. She's like, you are Wall Street. What's wrong with you? And so that was my biggest aha moment in terms of personal development, was just that you can take the best of what you had in the past and then find a way to apply it in your current situation. And I was not doing that. And when I realized that if I did that, then that would actually buy me more of the time and freedom and success that I wanted to be able to continue to scuba dive 3 times a week. And I looked at that, okay, this is actually going to help me get where I want to go, not suck me back into being chained to my desk for 14 hours a day. Then I started to realize, like, okay, this is not an all or nothing. So I think the lesson here is, and I did this in my corporate life all the time, is what can I use from before, apply it in a brand new situation, figure out the rest, and then continue to move on. But for some reason, when I made this shift, boom, it was, oh God. So it took me about 18 months to finally get it back again.
Well, it sounds like you really began to recognize that you needed some help,
Yeah, always. Yeah.
and then you got it.
I don't do anything without a coach anymore. I didn't have formal coaching in my corporate career. I've had great mentors. I was part of like top talent development programs and corporate mentor programs. So I always had support, but never like a private coach that was just for me to do my thing. But now, obviously, I'm in business, but now I will never function without one again. My coaches change based on my goals and where I'm going and what I need. But even in my corporate career, I would have what I called an advisory group. And these were a group of peers that were in different organizations. So we weren't worried about politics necessarily. And we get together once a month, have our steak and martinis and do all that, and just really solve each other's problems in that type of boardroom setting in terms of testing and challenging. And when I reinstated that as an entrepreneur, finding other entrepreneurs that are in the same spot that I am, right? That we can collaborate and kind of help each other out. And then, so those groups also continue to change as the business grows and as I show up differently in the market. But I think those things are invaluable to everyone.
Yeah, good point. Not just as an entrepreneur, but as an individual working in your career, whatever it may be, you need to have those mentors or a coach or somebody who can really help bring the best out of you.
Oh my goodness. No one wins alone.
Mm.
And I did this while we're recording this, actually, this is a 2-week segment during our organic post on the value of coaching, which is really funny that we're kind of leaning into this now. But in business, we're expected to know it all. But here's the reality. When you become the CEO of You Inc., and you really are sitting at that top spot, and you think about all the things a CEO does, right? The CEO is the first one to say, at least privately, that they don't have all the answers, right? The CEO seeks wisdom and gives wisdom away. Now, how many times do you sit on a good idea because you don't want your frenemy to steal it? Work. Like, oh, I'm telling everybody to steal my good idea and get all the credit. And so when you sit there in that CEO spot for you, they're like, hang on a second. And when you're out there looking to gain more wisdom and knowledge and sharing yours along the way, it's more enriching. You build deeper relationships, but you get smarter and you make better decisions for yourself, for the company, for everything else. So those are the things that I think as we start to apply those business leadership skills to our own personal self-leadership, then we start to show up and think differently about the whole situation.
Yeah, good stuff, Tammy. Thank you. What came to mind also is that most CEOs will tell you that they're not the smartest person in the room and that they lean on the people and their skills. And there's a book, Who Not How, which has been suggested on the podcast before, because it's like, here is somebody else who has skills in this area that can help you grow too, can help the business grow too, can help the company grow. So you're leaning into the skills that those people have. And yes, we have our own skills. And if you're the CEO, you've got your own skills at that level, but there are people who you can lean on that help everybody rise.
Yeah, just think of it as players on the field. Everyone has a play, and if you're missing a player, then that's going to be a hole, right? And those teams have coaches, and they've got, physical trainers, and they've got people who put your body back together when it falls apart again, and like all these things, right? And so if you just start to think that, okay, this doesn't have to be a me game, and take that idea one more step further in terms of finding people that have the skills that you don't, because that's how I succeeded. I was never the smartest person in the room. And so if I hadn't leaned on those people who had skills in all the areas that I did not, then we wouldn't be here today. There's no way. But then let's take that one step further and say, what if you could put a team together where all of the people on the team had different things that fired them up? They had different things that were their actual strengths. So instead of you doing, let's say you got 5 things to do, and one of them you love and 4 of them you don't, but what if you gave those 4 things to the people who love doing that and took the stuff that they have of yours that you love doing? So when you start to think about how you organize work, how you organize your day, how you spread the work around your coworkers or your teams, if we could all play to our strengths more, everything gets better. And that's the secret sauce. So it's surrounding yourself with people who have skills that you don't. They are not your threat. They are your superpower. And being able to put people in situations where they're playing to their strengths as much as you possibly can is a game changer for business results. It's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely can see that. And your analogy of the team and each player serves a purpose on the team and the coaches and the physical therapists and all of that. It's yes, obviously it's so super clear that when you apply those same philosophies to your business or a company, it's absolutely going to bring success faster.
That's right.
Well, so to change gears a little bit here, what would you say causes people to feel unfulfilled?
I asked myself that question a lot as I was starting the business. And when I started to listen to my customers, my target audience, people that were still in corporate, there is one word that showed up almost every time. And that word was impact. And it wasn't money, it wasn't power, it wasn't your knucklehead boss or any of that stuff. Like it was impact. And when you feel like you're on the sidelines or your work doesn't matter and you're not making that impact that you're here to make, that is soul crushing.
Mm.
And we all talk about purpose and trying to feed into our purpose. I think for some people that gets a little heady. And it's like, I just, my purpose is to, have a nice life and I'll worry about the rest later. But everyone wants to matter. Everyone wants to make a difference. Everyone wants to have that impact. And that I think is the key, right? That is the key that unlocks the golden handcuffs, that takes you to that place where you're driving the control and you're having a lot more fun doing it as well.
Yeah, good point. I can absolutely see that. The difference that we can make in what we're doing changes our perspective and how we feel about the thing we're doing.
Absolutely. And I thought it was really interesting because Gallup had 2 different research articles that they had put out at the same time that I thought was really interesting. So their global research on employee satisfaction, 80%. 80% of the people, knowledge workers around the world, are satisfied with their job. But yet, when you look at employee engagement, so how many people actually care about what they're doing and are excited about what they're doing, that is 25%. That's a really interesting, so for most of us, good enough. But when you are in that, what I call the comfort zone, then your impact starts to, dwindle. And eventually that is going to catch up with you. And you're going to be like, how did I get here? Like, where did this come from? All of a sudden I was cruising along. Everything was good. And now I'm miserable and I don't know why. All of a sudden you start getting marginalized. So I think that this apathetic haze that seems to have just layered over corporate America, I jokingly call it the zombie apocalypse, right? Everybody just kind of shuffles into work, does their thing, shuffles out. No one really cares about a whole lot, but we can change that, right? You can change that through connecting to aspiration, letting people play to their strengths and putting them in a position to do that and making sure that everything that they do actually has an impact and matters. And so it's just, if you're miserable, you know it. If you're comfortable, you're usually comfortable enough not to make a change, but pay attention to that comfort zone, because that could be the new smoking in terms of career, right?
Yeah. So this leads me to ask, if you're feeling, like you're comfortable, but it sort of feels stuck, how do you get unstuck?
Yeah. And so I think depending on your risk tolerance in terms of your unstuck, You really want to find, can I grow in place? Can I grow within my organization? Or do I need to take a step outside the organization to grow? Because when you can start to realize that, loving Mondays is not a pipe dream. It's not this little myth that doesn't exist. And people say, oh, that's why it's work and not fun and all these other things. Like, no, like I believe in truly fundamentally that loving Mondays is as essential as the air you breathe and the water that you drink, because it has such a massive impact on your entire life. We can't compartmentalize. And so when you stop accepting second best, when you stop saying close enough is good enough, and you start wanting more for yourself and getting it and doing the steps that you need to get unstuck, then that little piece of confidence that comes from doing that continues to blossom, right? And when you're stuck, your confidence takes a vacation. And we don't always walk around in a state of this negative inner voice and in a low confidence. It's cyclical. But what we think is that when we're in these moments, that all of a sudden one day, like the confidence fairy is going to sprinkle pixie dust while you're sleeping and you're going to get it back again. That's not how it works. Action is where the confidence comes from. So having that conversation with your boss saying, I want that project. Having conversations with your team saying, I need some life balance. Can you guys please pick up some slack for me? Those types of things are going to take you where you need to go. And there's no shame in being stuck. Everyone gets stuck. And, shameless plug here, but, that's where coaching can really help. It's help unwind the mess, unpack what's going on in your head with the loops that we get ourselves into, and give you that guidance to say, do this, then this, now that you've gotten your North Star and you know where you're heading. And so that type of insider information and insight is invaluable to shorten that cycle and get back on track again.
Yeah, excellent. Good point, Tammy, for sure. So what do you think are maybe the best opportunities for people kind of in today's sort of environment to become successful or increase their level of success?
We've got so much diversity in terms of the playground that we're in now, right? You've got the gig economy and you've got fractional executives and the regular corporate route and the entrepreneur space. There's so many different playgrounds that professionally we can play in, that I think with going through some of those options and seeing nothing is ever perfect. So what really hits the most of the buttons, then the check marks that you're looking for, I think really allows you to redefine success. I think COVID gave us the opportunity to rethink what was important. And now it's okay to say, you know what? I am not working on the weekends. I'm spending time with my family. I'm not going to do this anymore because it doesn't serve me and it's actually not necessary. I think now more than ever, we've got those opportunities. And for talent, it was like, oh, the layoffs and all the talent, that kind of stuff. So we've got all these people that think there's no work out there. We've got middle market companies that are dying from what they perceive as a talent shortage. Okay, where are we here? So for people who understand what they want to do, understand the value that it delivers to the business, and is able to identify, okay, this is my superpower, so I'm going to do, there's always room for those people. And there's always room for those people to thrive. So the more clarity you can have, and the more I always talk about the thing that lights you up, find areas where that thing is in high demand and in short supply. Because then you're always sitting at the pool kids table, right? You're always the one that's being tapped to do all the things. And we did another whole podcast before I knew we were running out of time, but we did a podcast to go through that one, right? But at least at a high level, those are some things you can think about.
Yeah, no, those are excellent suggestions for sure. I love it, Tammy. Thank you. And so before we begin to close out, I would love for you to share your book again. And for the viewers on YouTube, you can see it on your bookshelf behind you. But
I have a close-up version too, right? So if you're looking at it.
Fantastic. So tell us more of the title, where listeners can find it, all of the details.
It's called Escaping the Career Trap: Transform Your Apathy into Ambition and Never Hate Mondays Again. And the book really takes you from talking about the dysfunction that we're all in terms of the employer disconnect, But then we talk through a 3-step process to really get into that mindset of being the CEO of your career and running your career like a business. So we talk about align, which is the first step, and that's aligning to you and then taking the things that are most important to you and using those, again, to achieve the company's biggest goals. We talk about that. And then we talk about disrupt, because I'm a rule breaker and that's my favorite part. And we talk about all the things that people do and that we are doing in businesses that we should not, and what to do instead. And then the last part is thrive. And that's my favorite part, because that's really where we get to figure out, how do we pave it forward for others? How do we show others how to do this and take them along with us? And this book is designed to be a coaching guide for you. So it's a great read. A lot of people have said it's like me talking to them, which it literally is, because I did a lot of the narrative in a speaker, just riffing on the things that are in my head. And then we actually turned it into a book. But at the end of each section, there's an area that's called brain candy. And it's designed for you to personalize all the things that you just learned through stories. I've got like 35 stories of other people's journeys and in addition to my own and where they've been. And it really will give you what you need to succeed. And not just today, but for the long term. If you want a signed copy of the book with free promotional materials and things like that, then you can go to escapingthecareertrap.com. And then for softcover, an ebook, obviously that's on Amazon. And then the audiobook is on Audible. So we are everywhere. And if you do not love Mondays, then this is a must read for you.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. And I'll include the information in the show notes for sure. Is there any other books that you'd like to suggest that the listeners check out, or if there's podcasts that you enjoy listening to that you think would be beneficial?
Yeah, I dabble in all the things, right? So in terms of that, I think the book I read most recently that I love, and I'm going to mess up the author, I think, is Scale or Fail. And, it's for business owners and entrepreneurs and things, and about how to think about scaling your business. But I also think there are so many things that are applicable there in terms of how you run your career, how you think about that. So that was the one I just most recently finished, right? In terms of books that I love, but, podcasts and all that stuff, it's just, I'd like to dabble in everything. And, I'd like to say, okay, you're doing my walks in the morning. I'm like, all right, where am I going to get my hour and 15-minute podcast? Like, where's that one that takes me the whole way through?
Awesome. Well, thank you for that recommendation, and I'll include that in the show notes as well. And lastly, Tammy, how can the listeners find you? How can they follow along on the work that you're doing, dig into a little bit more, and maybe ask you any questions that they might have?
Yeah, absolutely. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect. I love nothing more than when people connect. I heard you on the podcast and we talk about the questions or their observations or whatever. So please reach out. Let's literally get to know each other instead of just be strangers. The social channels that we're on, we're very active on LinkedIn and YouTube. We got a little bit of a presence on Facebook and Instagram as well. But the careerwinnercircle.com is where you can find out about all of our coaching programs, learn a little bit more about me, our coaches, how we coach, what we coach on. And there are so many free resources that are there just waiting for you. So log in, dig in, and there's a lot of binge-worthy stuff there just waiting for you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Tammy. I will make sure all the details are in the show notes. Thank you for sharing this information with us. It's been fabulous, and I appreciate your time. Thank you again for coming on the show.
It was fantastic. My best part of the day. So thanks so much for the invite. I loved our conversation today.
Excellent. We'll talk more soon.
Thanks.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.